Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the XEROS Technology Group PLC interim results investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so, and these will be available via your Investor Meet company dashboard. Before we begin, I would like to submit the following poll, and I would now like to hand you over to the executive management team from XEROS Technology Group PLC. Neil, good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon, Jack. Thank you for that introduction. Just a brief introduction for myself. So I'm Neil Austin. I'm the Chief Executive of XEROS Technology. With me here in our HQ in Rotherham is Alex Tristram.
Alex Tristram, Finance Director here at XEROS.
Just in terms of how we approach today, mindful that there will be new people to the story as well as some long-standing investors. So to kind of give everybody an opportunity to learn about the story, we will do a brief introduction to XEROS and its technologies, and then we'll get into some more specifics about our interim statement, which we issued last Wednesday. Just before we do that, we're very glad, very lucky that we've got our chairman, Klaas de Boer, who's joined us today as well. So Klaas, if I could hand over to you, perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself and give everybody a little bit of perspective of yourself from a chairman's perspective.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you, Neil. Yes, hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Klaas de Boer, chairman of XEROS. I have been in this role since early 2020, but have known the company for much longer. The fund I used to run, Entrepreneurs Fund, first invested in XEROS back in 2010. Through that period, I was never really personally involved. And after the company listed on AIM and my colleague stepped down from the board in 2015, as an early stage investor, we were actually seeking to realize our investment at that point in time. But all of that changed in late 2019, when Entrepreneurs Fund was the cornerstone investor in a rescue financing at that point in time. Important reason for that investment was the recognition of the strategic importance of XEROS, of the XEROS technology for the entire garment value chain. And the other factor at that point in time was that under the leadership of Mark Nichols, the company had returned to its roots and its original business model of a capital light, pure play licensing business model. Shortly after joining the board as chairman, COVID hit, and it hit us hard. We had licensing agreements in place in China and India at that point in time, and with all the travel restrictions imposed on us, the implementation of our technology in those geographies was seriously hampered because we couldn't travel. The other thing, of course, was that one of the important end user markets, the hospitality sector, totally shut down. Coming out of COVID, and I wanted to give this backdrop as a bit of context for where we are today. Coming out of COVID, it also became clear that it had not just been say the effects of COVID, but also that as a business, we had been too much technology-led and not enough market-led. So I'm still very pleased that we were able to attract Neil last year to help the company become much more commercial. And as you will have read in our interims, and also will hear from Neil and Alex today, he has taken significant cost out of the organization and at the same time strengthened the commercial side of the business, and the results of that are starting to show. And with that, a bit of context, I'll hand it back to Neil and Alex.
Super. Thank you very much, Klaas, for kind words. Without further ado, let's take you through the presentation. First thing to really highlight is what are XEROS? Who are we? What do we do? There's some really key points that I want to draw your attention to in the text on the right-hand side. So license is the first one, as Klaas has just told us. We are a licensing business. We've made a very conscious decision that we don't want to be in the business of manufacturing. We don't want to sell. What we're very good at is creating market-leading technology and then finding the right partners to take us to market. So license is the first keyword. Second one is sustainable. We are very firmly in the green tech position. we are clear about what our value is, not only to our shareholders and to business, but also to the planet in a wider sense. Proprietary technology is the other key one. We are not a Me-Too solution. We very much strive to have market-leading propositions, and pretty much across the board, we've got third-party validation of that effect. Then to clarify where we play specifically, we're talking about the laundry and the apparel industries, and we'll go on to subsequent slides and give you a little bit of an indication about how those are actually quite tightly tied together, even if it isn't immediately clear. And then what solutions do we offer? Very clearly, energy and water usage is extremely high. It's causing issues, both in terms of cost to business and to the planet. We have solutions to improve that, and indeed when it comes to pollution. So whether that is chemicals that are used within the processing of garments or the cleaning of garments, or actually more pertinently microplastics as well. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide, this gives you a little bit of an indication of what we're trying to do. So effectively, this is some of our marketing material, and we are in the business of unpolluting. We're trying to unpollute industries and a number of different players. This schematic gives you a little bit of an indication of the life cycle, if you like, of an article of clothing. So right from the left-hand side, where we're talking about the production of the fibers that go into the creation of that article of clothing, all the way through to the end, which is the end of life of that garment, which unfortunately, more often than not, it is in the guise of landfill. The charts that you will see before you are the percentage of the CO2e footprint of the lifetime of that garment. Now, the two peaks that you will see come at two specific points. One is the textile production, and specifically the final stage of that being the bleaching, the dyeing, or the finishing, the final wash. And then the second one being on the use of that garment, or more clearly, the laundering of that garment as well. Now, we at XEROS have a very clear mandate, which is we want to be able to add value and to create scenarios whereby players within that industry can not only improve their green footprint, but can also save money and save water. These two peaks illustrate very clearly where the industry is in distress. And this is why we have very specifically come up with technologies which will help them address some of those issues that they have. The first one being XFN, which is our finish technology for the final stage of textile production. And the second being within the use space, where we've got the XC or the care technology, and the XF, which is the filtration technology. Okay, so if we keep going, Alex, how do we do that? So we've got a very clear strategy for our market penetration. So we've mentioned a couple of times that we're a licensing business. The good news is that those partnerships, which are important within a licensing business, are already in place. So across our three different technologies that I just mentioned, we have licensees already signed up and in place to be able to take our propositions to market. The second and third piece are probably more recent developments under my watch of the business that we've really focused on. The second being direct engagement. So yes, it's right and it's appropriate that we focus our energies in terms of finding licensees, but we don't leave it entirely up to them to ensure the success of our technologies. So when we say direct engagement, what we mean is engagement with those decision makers that will decide if our technology gets adopted or not. So whether that be retail or fashion brands within the finish space, or whether that be with the washing machine manufacturers within the care or the filtration space, we have a very concerted sales and marketing effort, and it is about influencing those decision makers. The third piece, which is driving influence, is all about the other stakeholders within this space. So as a global leader, which we recognize ourselves, and indeed have been recognized externally, particularly within microplastic expertise, we are called upon as a business, and indeed we actively drive the agenda when it comes to collaborating with NGOs, collaborating with legislators. This is about creating the environment so that the solutions which XEROS has able to provide are fully understood by people that will help to influence how that unfolds. Okay, so to talk a little bit more about the technologies, I'll talk us through firstly filtration. I'll hand over to Alex to talk us through finish, and then I'll conclude with care. So what do we mean when we talk about filtration? So filtration addresses primarily microplastics, and microplastics is an issue across the globe, which I think most people are fully aware of. What they maybe don't know is the scale of that impact. So here we unveil some of the impacts, firstly, from a human perspective. Some of the numbers that you can see before you is that any single one of us on the planet in an average year will either inhale or ingest somewhere in the region of about 170,000 microplastics. Now, ultimately, these microplastics are being found in the organs of people, and the truth is nobody really knows the impact that this is going to have. But as laymen, I think we can understand that's probably not a good place to be. The second, from a business impact, we have one example. So not surprisingly, the fisheries impact is one of the first to be impacted, not least because of the amount of microplastics that are flown into the oceans. We have drawn upon studies which highlights the fact that somewhere in the region of 20% up to 26% of the total annual operating costs of municipal fisheries processing has now had to be diverted to dealing with the impact of microplastics. So whether that is in terms of waste management or cleaning the plastic pollution, this is a significant cost which is now being felt by that industry first and clearly will by others in due course. And from a planetary impact as well, the numbers are quite concerning. So 2005, we already had a significant number of about 17 billion microplastics at play within the water system. Unfortunately, that's now got to 171 trillion. So a tenfold increase in just 18 years, and that is not slowing down. So what can we do about it? So this is the first introduction of the XEROS technology, which is what we call X-Filter. So the X-Filter, as you see, is a mesh filter, which is used in conjunction with a washing machine, can be a commercial, or indeed in its first instance, can be with a domestic washing machine. So as I said, we have three specific propositions when it comes to X-Filter. The first and most mature is called XF1. XF1 is effectively an integrated filtration device which goes inside the washing machine. The second is XF2, which is a proposition for a commercial washing machine environment. And this is effectively a supercharged version of XF1, which can withstand a greater volume of water and equally is built in a more robust fashion, so it can withstand the realities of a commercial laundry environment. And XF3 is our latest proposition, which we unveiled just a few weeks ago at IFA, which is one of the world's largest consumer electronics fair. And it's effectively taking all of the great market-leading technology that we have on XF1, but it encloses it within an external device. So just to give you a little bit more color around this, we have independently third-party verified by the Hohenstein Institute, a very well-respected testing laboratory in Germany, a 99% capture rate. This is market-leading, not surprisingly, versus anybody else that's at play within this space. Not only that, but we've conducted lifetime testing on the filter itself as well ourselves. So we know that actually this filter will withstand pretty much the lifetime of a washing machine. So our partners can put this product in conjunction with their machines with absolute confidence that they know they get a good capture rate, and equally they know that it will last the longevity of the machine. Just to share some of the numbers, which are pretty significant when we talk about this opportunity. So XF1 and XF3 are about trying to take advantage of the quite significant domestic washing machine market. So XF1 is about how many washing machines are sold globally every single year. And it's 100 million machines produced every single year. And you can see that XEROS believes that we can get around about £2.50 per unit yield of profit on each of those sales should we reach that level of mass maturity. On XF3, this gives us an opportunity to be able to get our proposition ready for an install base of washing machines. So right for new purchasers of washing machine that they can get the technology, but for the approximately 1 billion washing machines that are already out there, which are working perfectly well and don't need to be changed, we want to give those users the opportunity to be able to use the XEROS technology. So XF3 as a retrofit gives them the chance to do that. And as you can see, we identify a pretty significant opportunity of approximately £100 million per annum as well on that. XF2, as I said, is the commercial proposition, much more profitable per unit for XEROS as it's a bigger, more powerful unit, but a slightly smaller market size. Okay. Something which those familiar with the story will know quite well, but those new to it may not, is that we actually already have a pretty good level of maturity when it comes to our filtration proposition. So we currently have 3 licensing partnerships in place with what we call component manufacturers. So these are businesses that operate in the supply of the various pieces which are required to construct a washing machine. All 3 based in Europe. And with those three partnerships in place, we have access through their pre-existing commercial relationships from a supply chain perspective, effectively into the entirety of the global market. So 99 million washing machine units of 100 or thereabouts is pretty much the entirety of the global demand for washing machines. And you can see an example of some of those brands on the right-hand side. So the opportunity today, we've got those licensees in place, as I said, is very much about the third part of our strategy, which is how we can drive awareness of that through our partnerships. So the partnerships are very much taken the form of cooperating with really very well-respected opinion leaders within the space about the reality of microplastics and the potential damage that they can cause to us as human beings and equally to the ecosystem as well. So a number of the logos, the brands that you'll see on the left-hand side recognize us as a peer. So XEROS is very much respected as the market leader when it comes to washing machine microplastics. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we've had some pretty good press coverage as well. The opportunity tomorrow is also pretty exciting. So we are an R&D company at our very heart, and for sure we don't rest on our laurels. So as well as the application of our technology within the laundry sector, we're also very excited about the potential to be able to move it into an industrial manufacturing sector as well. So as Alex talks you through the Finnish side of the business, you'll understand that XEROS actually has a very good reputation and already has a very good lead into the manufacturing sector. And you can see that of those 1.3 million factories that process textiles or garments around the world, we believe that over half of those are in need of a microplastic solution. And indeed, some of them have proactively, whether from manufacturing or indeed a retail garment brand, have sought out solutions from XEROS directly. Just to talk a little bit about the right-hand side, which is legislation. So again, those of you that know the story for XEROS very well will understand actually that the legislative environment is very favorable towards microplastics capture within washing machines. So actually, if we go to the next slide, you can see on the left-hand side some of those really big markets, Western Europe, North America, and indeed APAC, and an understanding of the size of the new machine production every single year, and indeed the install base. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the reality of how the legislative environment is really starting to take shape. So as you can see at the top of the list, France is the first country to legislate that from January 1st, 2025, every single washing machine which is sold to a consumer must have a microplastics capture capability associated with it. In addition to that, the European Union, the United Kingdom, and indeed the California state legislature, which will lead the rest of the United States, are at advanced stages in terms of being able to consider microplastics legislation to support it. And indeed, in the same way that France looked to XEROS to be able to support that expert opinion, XEROS has been working closely with the European Union, with the UK Private Members Initiative, and indeed the California State Legislature Members Bill as well. So huge markets and huge opportunity. As I say to everybody when we're having this conversation, it's very clear that this is not a case of if this will happen, it's more a case of when and within which regions. Okay, if I hand over to Alex to take us a little bit through the Finnish proposition.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So we showed you that slide earlier on, which gave details of the climate impact of a garment's kind of life cycle. This just brings that into a little bit of a starker relief. So the fashion industry, we believe, is responsible for around 4% of global CO2 emissions. XEROS has a proposition which enables those who take it up when they implement a machine fitted with our XEROS technology, which I'll explain in a minute, to save 44 tons of CO2 every year, and that's just one machine. And these factories use a lot more than just one. So to give you a kind of an overview of why there is a problem here that needs addressing. So the garment finishing industry and the fashion industry the people who work in that industry are often in really poor conditions, and the kind of the processes and that they undergo, and that they what they do to the garments has an impact on their health, and it's it's a real problem for them. From a business point of view, this is an enormous industry. There are 75 million people globally who are employed in this, and if we take just jeans, which is the first area that we're targeting with our XEROS technology, there are around 2 billion pairs of jeans made every year, which is it's just an enormous market. From a planetary point of view, the fashion industry is hugely hungry. So it takes 79 trillion litres of water. It produces vast amounts of solid waste, and those 4% of global CO2 emissions that I talked about earlier on. So this is a dirty industry that kind of likes to keep that secret. You don't hear a lot about it, but we know in the background that they're crying out for solutions in a way that they can kind of really impact on what they do. So how do we impact the garment finishing industry? To kind of take this up to a high level, if you take a pair of jeans, every pair of jeans that gets sold around the world starts off as raw denim, and that's stiff purple denim straight off the production line when it's made, and then that undergoes a number of processes to take it to the finish, the look, the feel that the garment providers want to sell to consumers. And that's done in a number of ways, but historically it's been done with pumice stone and various chemicals which are kind of very harsh on the garments. What can XEROS technology do? Well, we can replace that pumice stone, and we can bring down the chemistry involved to a much lower level, which means you can run the same cycles, you can run the same washes, but the water that you need to use, the energy you need to use, and the chemistry you need to use is much reduced, which saves. That's how we save that CO2e that we talked about earlier on, but it also saves time and it saves money for the producers. This is a visual representation of the little plastic balls we call XEROS being introduced into a denim finishing machine. So they pop out, they all come out at the right time in the process, and we harvest them out at the appropriate times during that cycle. There's a visual representation of something we call the X drum on the left-hand side there. So that's the other key part of our process when we talk about our denim finishing. So the XEROS, they're introduced into the wash cycle, and what they allow us to do is to distribute the chemicals and distribute the things which act on the jeans inside the wash in a much more efficient manner. But obviously the important thing then is getting them out when they've done their work. And so the X drum is an addition in the back of the machine, and that works to harvest those XEROS during the right period of the cycle, so that when they finish the work, they open the door, the jeans come out, there aren't any XEROS in there. So to just give you a little stat that we kind of like to quote on the right-hand side there, you can use 10 years of drinking water for one person to make a single pair of jeans. It's an enormously thirsty industry, and it takes a lot of that water. Now, we often get said, people say, well, does that not just come out of the other side and go back into the water table? Sometimes, yes, but often no. By the time it's been through this process, it's filled with dye, it's covered in chemicals, it's got pumice stone float. It's not. It goes in pristine water. It doesn't come out like that. So what can we do? We can reduce that water and that chemistry by up to 50%. It's by introducing XEROS into the cycle, we can really bring that down. And this is a big market. So we think there are around 8,000 to 10,000 machines sold every year that go into the garment finishing industry, particularly for denim. And so we think there's a significant market for us to go at in that space. So how do we do that? So we've had 2 licensed partners that have licensed our technology. So that's Ramsons, an Indian company, and really excitingly signed this year a company called Yilmaz based in Turkey. Now Yilmaz are they're seen as a market leader in Turkey. They're a really good manufacturing partner for us. And they launched their technology to some acclaim launched our technology in their machines, I should say, to some acclaim during this year, particularly at the ITMA show in Milan, which is a huge textile expo that they attended. So it was really positive to see them, putting that front and center of their stand, but really, really positive to see the reception that it got from the industry players that we saw at that show. It was really well received, and we believe that with those 2 manufacturing partnerships in place, it really gives us a chance to go at a market which is really crying out for solutions. We spend a lot of time on the ground with the denim industry, and there is not a solution like this that can offer the benefits that we can see. They're all really, really looking for it. Alongside the denim piece, a few years ago, our leather team led a management buyout. So they spun out the leather team to a separate business, I think back in 2019 now. So they are live using this technology in tanneries across the world. And I say that the denim industry is a dirty business. If you think that's dirty, the leather industry is on another level entirely. But that's another revenue stream for us that kind of generates that every year. It's not hugely significant yet, but we see it getting slightly more important over the next few years. And as we said with the filtration, we get some nice press on this because, like we say, it's a really good story, the denim technology that we can bring to the market. So what happens from now? So we've got to get into that denim market. We're working with our licensed partners to penetrate that market. But beyond that, the garment finishing industry has a lot of scope for us beyond just that denim. So garment dyeing is another area with a significant market that we can address. The garment dyeing machines are made by the same partners that we already have, and they go into the same kinds of factories that we have the relationships with. So we think that's an area we can really sharpen up. And then beyond that, every single garment that gets sold in every shop around the world gets a final wash as it comes off the machine. So it collects grease and dirt as it's sewed or made across the process, and it needs a wash before it goes onto the shop floor. That final wash, we really believe that XEROS technology can make a difference in that. If we can get into that market, it's absolutely vast, and we really think we can make a difference from a cost perspective for the suppliers, but also from an environmental point of view. And just as an indication there, we think we can, if every pair of jeans was manufactured in our technology, we could save the same amount of water that's used in Malta every year, which is just a nice little stat.
Okay, so just to talk you through CARE. So CARE is, as I said, it's kind of the laundry application of XEROS technology. Now, the observant amongst you will see similarities in terms of the tech when it comes to CARE, as we've mentioned, to finish. So effectively, what are we trying to do with CARE? It's the same idea. So as well as offering energy, water, and the chemistry savings with the implementation of the XORBs, particularly within this space, we're also seeing some really significant benefits when it comes to garment life extension. So when we say garment life extension, we mean literally the clothes that people buy and that they wear will last longer and will look better for a longer period of time. So we click through and give a little bit of a sense. So from a kind of a human impact, fast fashion is unfortunately a very, very clear reality of our modern society. So 60% more clothes are actually being purchased today than they were 15 years ago. And the rather sad statistic is that the majority of those, some 73%, are ending up in landfill. And there's a direct cost associated with that. So if we just look at the UK alone, about £140 million worth of clothes every single year is either incinerated or goes to landfill. And that is at a pretty significant cost as well, of about £82 million to us as the British taxpayers. So what are XEROS trying to do about that? So as I said before, you'll see effectively it's the same technology as we have on Finish. So we're introducing an additional agent, which is the XORB. And the idea being that XORBs actually are better at fulfilling the process of cleaning clothes than water on its own. If you think about it, how we clean clothes really hasn't changed fundamentally in hundreds of years. And indeed, the modern washing machine as we see it today hasn't really changed from its first evolution back in the 50s and 60s. The only major difference is the fact that it's now got much better consumer electronics within it. What we at XEROS are doing, and I've already started this process, is by starting to revolutionize this industry by introducing, as I said, an additional element. So XORBs can displace the amount of water, so we're saving that straight away. We displace the amount of water and immediately we're saving the amount of energy because the heating of that water is the most energy intensive part of the washing cycle. And the other very hugely beneficial piece is that XORBs are actually much better at using the detergents that we would add to a more effective degree, which means that you can use less of them as well. So if we keep going to the next slide, Alex. So to give you a little bit of sense again of what it is. So here we've got an illustration of a washing machine drum. So similar as we had with Finish, we introduced the XORBs within that. And as Alex said on Finish, the real magic that we have is how do we introduce them, but we also harvest them so that they do the good, which I've just mentioned, but we also effectively get to a situation which for a consumer using the device, by the end of the cycle, pretty much all of those XORBs have been harvested in totality. On the right-hand side, we start to see a little bit of what we mean when we talk about the garment life extension. So on the left-hand side of the split of the picture is something which we'll all be too familiar with. After 10 washes of this denim chemise, you will effectively start to see patchy dye. You'll see an increased stress upon the seams. You will see wrinkling, and you'll often see shrinkage in totality of the product itself. On the right-hand side, what we start to see? Absolutely a reduced color fade. The shape is much better, and indeed the solid fabric surface is much better. The whole idea is we're trying to keep the clothes in the same condition as they were for as long as possible when the consumer first purchased them. If we can do that, then they will keep them for much longer, as well as obviously benefiting from their lower energy and water savings as well. Just to give a little bit of sense of the reality of where the business is today. So we have a level of maturity with our commercial laundry proposition today. And the example that we always like to give is an existing laundromat, a commercial scale laundromat in France called Georges. They have some pretty significant contracts with the likes of Air France and SNCF, and they've been using the XEROS technology for a number of years now. Taking the data that they have generated, we now know for a fact that using one washing machine as an example, a 25 kg, running on average 14 cycles a day, saves Georges £10,000 a year, or 2 million litres of water. And when you think about the reality that the on-cost for purchasing a XEROS-enabled bit of kit is only somewhere in the region of around about £1,500 to £2,000, albeit there are the ongoing costs related to XEROS, there is significant savings for Georges across the lifetime of this machine. Not only that, but the thing that we talked to before, which is that garment life extension, is already starting to be seen. So SNCF have already been able to report back that they see a garment life extension for their uniforms of 15 months. So this is significant savings, not only to Georges as a customer of the XEROS technology, but of SNCF as a customer of Georges as well. So where do we take this technology tomorrow? Well, clearly it's great that we're having some success within the commercial part of the laundry business, and we would like to scale that up, and indeed there are plans to do that over the next couple of years. But the real piece that we would like to get to, if you move to the next slide, Alex, is to move us into the world of domestic laundry as well. So we have a pre-existing partnership in India with a company called IFB. IFB are the largest manufacturer of washing machines, commercial and domestic, within the Indian market. And as a brand, they also have a top 3 position with the Indian consumer as well. IFB are at the concluding stages of the development of a domestic platform, a 9 kg platform for using the XEROS technology. And indeed, our technical team were in IFB just a few weeks ago, and they reported back that there are no longer any barriers from a technical perspective in terms of the finalization of this machine. So our expectation is that we will be able to launch that in the foreseeable future, which will for sure not only give us the opportunity of revenue generation, but a much long-held ambition for the team, which is that it will get into the hands of consumers within their own homes as well. Okay, if we move on, this is an idea, this is our attempt to try and give everybody a bit of a sense of what our strategy roadmap is. So we've talked a little bit about the reality of where the business is today, and you can see in terms of care, filtration, finish, we have a very good foundation to be able to leverage from. Distribution in India and China, and they did a very strong case study on commercial laundry, but an imminent launch within the Indian market of a domestic platform. Now, where do we want to take this to? My ambition when I came into the business some 12 months ago was absolutely, yes, to validate and to be able to take the pre-existing relationships that we had over the finish line, but very much to be able to ensure that we had meaningful conversations with the major global brands. Now, I'm very pleased to report today that of those top 10 global brand families, the names of which we will all know at home, we're in meaningful conversations with 4 of them, and we're in conversations, earlier stage conversations with another 4. So that's 8 of the top 10 are directly engaging with XEROS about its technology. So confident are we at this moment in time, we can state that our ambition is that we will absolutely have a global brand launch of the technology within an 18 to 36 month window. And coming with that, we will have a launch within the European and North American markets, which, as we discussed before, are fairly significant. Beyond that, our expectations is that beyond that 3-year window, we will move from one global brand launching up to 3. And those 3 global brands will account for, our expectation is, about 30% of global share today. So a third of the market in the world, so some 30 million washing machines sold every year, will have the XEROS technology as part of their proposition. From a filtration perspective, as we said earlier as well, we already have 3 licensing partnerships in place. We recently launched as well an external proposition, which gives us the opportunity to be able to access that install base that we talked about before. And again, so confident are we in the current conversations that we're having with major brands that we believe that we will have an XF2, so this is the external device, full-scale launch into the European market before that 18-month window is concluded. That will then move to, our expectation is three global brands prescribing, taking the XEROS technology, and then ultimately a move into distribution within APAC and North America. The North American distribution piece being very much driven by the California legislation. From a development perspective as well, we're also expecting to be able to have a full-scale launch of the XF2 product before that 18-month window within Europe. And then ultimately this R&D piece of work that we have at the moment will lead to a launch within the garment processing industry as well within a 3-year window. From a finish perspective, we have 2 licensing agreements in place, as Alex said, with a Turkish and an Indian manufacturer. And our expectation is that, particularly with one of the global leaders being Yilmaz in place, that we will imminently be able to announce a partnership effectively with a global apparel brand. So this will be an endorsement of that brand to say that they want their garment manufacturer to use the XEROS technology in the manufacture of a core range. Again, so meaningful are the conversations that we have with those global retail brands. Their expectation is that within the 18 to 36 month window, that we will move from 1 to 6 brand endorsement. And at the same time, we will build our install base of machines with a move into a licensing partnership to cover the Americas as well. And always running parallel, we are an R&D business, so we will continue to evolve and develop and fine-tune the propositions that we have within our 3 core spaces, and also look for new complementary technologies as well. So Alex can just talk you through a little bit in terms of the core investment case.
Yeah, so we've given you kind of a flavour of the investment case, but just to distill it down to a few bits here. So we talk about our proprietary technology. That's not theoretical technology. We have kind of market-based and scientific-based evidence for both of those. So if we look at care and finish, those are in the market today, being used commercially and being used commercially successfully. And if we talk about our microplastic solution, we know that that's market leading, and the conversations we have with brands reflect that. Underneath that, it's all protected from an IP perspective. We say this quite frequently, but after headcount, our IP costs are the most significant part of the group's cost portfolio, because we rely on that to be, we can't generate license revenue without having a robust IP portfolio underneath that. So this is our technology, and we know that it works. If we talk about the business model more generally, so a licensing model means that when our partners start generating meaningful revenues, the license revenues for us will drop through to the bottom line pretty quickly. We don't need a big team underneath us to generate our revenues. It's the work that we've already done, and it's the work that we're doing to commercialise that technology now that will deliver those margins. The global market solution, we've tried to explain to you over the course of this presentation why the world is in need of the XEROS solutions that we've got. There is increasing focus across the piece from microplastics to domestic laundry, all the way across to the garment processing industries, that they need something which will help them reduce their carbon footprint and reduce the impact they have on the environment. We don't see solutions that can offer the impacts that we can out on the market. We really don't. From a financial point of view, we talked about it earlier on, but our operational cash outflow is down £1 million the first half of 2023 against 2022. That's come from some of the operational savings that Neil put in place when he started. That's flowed through to our adjusted EBITDA loss. We've spent less than £500,000 a month for the first half of 2023. and we expect that to be lower for the second half. We see line of sight to month-on-month cash flow and EBITDA break even in the second half of 2024 with the portfolio of licensing partners that we have and we expect to have.
Okay, so just to talk more specifically about what's kind of new. So what are some of the highlights in terms of the last 6 months? So I talked before about the importance of licensing agreements to the XEROS proposition. And I'm pleased to say that we've made some really good progress on that. So we had one in place when I joined the business on microplastics filtration, but it was clear that we were going to need more than one. If any of the major washing machine brands were going to take us seriously, we needed to be able to offer them more than one choice in terms of manufacturer, and indeed we needed to get greater market access as well. So as I said earlier in the presentation, with the 3 that we have in hand today, we have got full access to the market from a manufacturing perspective. We've also made some good developments in terms of finish. We really highlighted the fundamental difference that YieldMac in particular made to us as a business. We've had an ongoing, very good discussion with fashion brands and fashion retailers as well. These guys understand what we're trying to do. They're very keen to get their hands on the technology. We needed to have a number of manufacturing partnerships in place so that we could push from a retailer perspective to the garment manufacturer, but also push and provide a solution from the machinery manufacturer perspective as well. With YieldMac in place, we now are very confident that we have closed the loops, that we will be able to start to see this technology get into the hands of the ultimately of the consumer and indeed of the garment manufacturers. In terms of the filtration offer specifically, I mean, this is a very topical piece, not least because of France's decision to put a hard stop of Jan 1st, 2025 on washing machines being produced which don't have this technology. Because we're closer to the market, my particular background is actually working within that industry for a number of years. And I've used and leveraged those contacts. And I've also beefed up our commercial proposition as well in terms of having boots on the ground. We are very close to understanding what people want from a washing machine brand perspective. It became clear through this year as it unfolded that having an external proposition as well as an internal proposition was going to be fundamental. We took our time and we made sure that we were going to have the best that we possibly could. And the great news was that when we launched this in the last few weeks at IFA, Europe's premier consumer electronics fair in Berlin, the combination that we offered in terms of efficacy, in terms of flexibility of placement of the machine, and indeed in terms of price, absolutely gave us a very, very strong response from all of the brands that we spoke to. We're very confident when it comes to that proposition, and XF3 kind of continues to validate that. The third piece is clearly, as I joined the business and have got my feet under the table and understood what's good about the business, I've also seen where there is opportunity for improvement as well. Part of the second strand of our strategy, which we talked about before, which is getting closer to those decision makers, clearly necessitated an ability of the business to be able to be much more commercial at its very core, at its very heart. And I'm pleased to say that we have a very strong commercial team in place, headed up most recently by the appointment of a very experienced chief commercial officer who has been working with the business on a consultancy basis and has now come on board to help us hands-on. And then the final bit, as Alex has said, is cost control. So it's one of the core beliefs that I have at heart, which is that we need to cut our cloth accordingly. It was important to me that we were able to right-size the business. And actually, although we've managed to make some really good progress on the commercial side and we have a stronger team, we also identified opportunity to be able to operate a little bit more prudently and a little bit more efficiently. And as Alex said, that has led to approximately £2 million of annualized costs, which we've taken out of the business. Okay, Alex, you want to take us through the financials?
Yeah, so I mean, we've kind of touched on the financial highlights so far in the presentation, but just to reiterate, cash-wise, we spent from cash flow from operations down £1 million against this time last year. Revenue, we didn't expect this half to be a hugely significant revenue 6 months for us, but I mean, we made some progress from last year. We expect this year's revenue to be back-end loaded, and the reason for that is just the timing of the work done by our licensed partners. So we know the kind of cadence of what they work to, and we can kind of plan accordingly. So we expect the second half to be more significant than the first half, certainly when it comes to revenue. the changes that Neil's just talked about in terms of making sure the business is at the right place cost-wise has flowed through to our adjusted EBITDA. So that's the kind of key metric for us that kind of takes out some of the variables that we don't necessarily have control over. So that's an area that we've saved some significant funds this year.
Okay, so just to kind of give a little bit of a summary, I mean, those of you close to the story will kind of notice, but I think it helps sometimes just to really drill down to the specifics of what we have to offer as a business. So, I mean, we genuinely have market-leading technology. We believe, I guess most businesses do when they start off, but I see this still as relatively new to the business. It's validated time and again. So in some cases, quite literally, it's validated by third-party testing institutes, but we see it in terms of the engagements we get. So with our potential customers, when we see our potential customers come to market. So the response that we got hand in hand with Yieldmac on the finished technology was incredible. The response that we got to IFA and our consumer electronics fair was really, really strong. We have every confidence in terms of our proposition. In terms of the second piece, we've talked about it before as well. We've absolutely got the right business model in place. Klaus mentioned it before at the very beginning that a decision was taken to move to a kind of an IP-rich asset-light model, and it's absolutely the right one. As and when we start to accelerate through into the more global agreements that we have in sight, the core running costs of the business will not increase exponentially. So the core costs that we need and we have today will remain the same. So that's a great return for the investors. In terms of the third piece, this is not a theoretical technology. This is a technology which has been seen, which has been tested, and ultimately some of the leaders within these fields have decided that they want to partner with XEROS. So we have commercial agreements in place, and the right commercial agreements in place as well, I should add, which will enable us to be able to move this business forward. The fourth piece, which Alex mentioned before, is really relevant as well. We are pushing an open door. Whether we talk about microplastics, whether we talk about water scarcity, whether we talk about energy efficiencies, across all of the industries, and particularly in the two that we are targeting, these are issues that they want and they're requesting solutions for. And then the final piece, which is coverage and protection. So our heart, as I said, we're an R&D business. The way that we protect ourselves is through our IP. We have a very significant level of IP, 38 separate patent families. We don't just cover the IP that we have for our technologies. We're aggressive as well. We move out so that we can stop from any potential competition from getting close to what our proposition is. Quite rightly, we've decided and taken the decision that beyond the running costs from a staff perspective, IP should be the second largest area that we invest within the business because it gives us our future longevity. Okay.
So yeah, these are just slides indicating a bit more colour around the financial statements that we released as part of our interim results. I don't propose to go through them in any detail. We've kind of touched on the highlights, so I will kind of jump across those. The one thing to pull up on here is our share register. So we have benefited over the years from a supportive investor community, and those are some of the names that have supported us over the years. So I think that was it from kind of the presentation point of view. So if we could hand back to Jay.
Perfect. Neil, Klaus, Alex, thank you very much indeed for your presentation this afternoon. I'll just jump back in there before we move to the questions. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab that's situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the team take a few moments to review those questions that were submitted already, I would like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. Klaus, Neil, Alex, we did receive a number of pre-submitted questions ahead of today's event, and as you can see there in the Q&A tab, we've also received a number of questions throughout your presentation this afternoon as well. So if I may just hand back to you just to make your way through those questions, and if you could give your responses where it's appropriate to do so, and then I'll pick up from you at the end. Thank you.
Okay, super.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you for your questions, and do keep submitting if there's anything that comes to mind. Neil and I will run down them and answer what we can, if that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I think one of the first questions which we actually received earlier today is, it's effectively about with the commercial agreements that we have in place. and obviously the reality of the revenue stream that we've had in the first half of the year, I guess ultimately the question is asking how can we have confidence about the piece moving forward? I think the key thing to say here is that we took a very conscious decision, Alex and I, when we effectively assumed responsibility for the business, to be able to be responsible and as accurate as we could be with our forecasts and our predictions. 2023 was always a year for us which was about build. So there, as I said at the beginning, we needed to close off a number of the key relationships that we had in place, and we've done that. But 2023 has been about build. So the revenue which we talked about, the profit which we talked about for 2023, we still believe that we can achieve. It was always going to be very much weighted to the second half of the year, not least because we knew that Yieldmac was going to be signed, which would give us the opportunity to break through from a finished perspective. And equally, we knew that some of the developments that we put in place, particularly with IFB, both on commercial and indeed on the domestic piece, weren't going to come until the second half of the year. So I think the key piece is that we feel absolutely confident in terms of the numbers, and this is why we reiterated the numbers that we've said for 2023 we see happening, absolutely. And indeed, the numbers that we've talked about for 2024 as well, we see those happening. I mean, 2024 will also start to be a little bit more weighted to the back end. And not surprisingly, a lot of that is to do with the legislative environment, which is driving the timing related to some of the actions from the European bodies when it comes to implementation of filtration pieces. So that's that question. There is a question as well specific to IFB and the 9kg platform. So what's the feedback that we've had from IFB? So this one's pre-submitted. So I think we touched briefly upon that as well. The technical team were there just a matter of weeks ago, and they have been very hands-on this year. Indeed, we had one of our institutional investors with us this morning, and he was surprised to see that we're doing very hands-on work with IFB in terms of our testing here within HQ in Sheffield as well. So the latest that we hear from IFB is that they are very satisfied with the progress that has been made. They have absolutely a functional, fully operating machine, which is great, bearing in mind that there was a decision to move to a new platform in the early parts of the year. So yes, taking the learnings that the team has had for a couple of years in terms of the lead up to this, but actually there's been a real fast track implementation onto that new platform. It's been some sort of 8 months so far, which is really good. And our expectations is that launch will be imminent. I don't want to be specific in terms of that because obviously it's not our decision, it's IFB's product. They will launch as and when they see fit. But in terms of the confidence that we get from IFB, it's very good and it's very high. So yeah, we're very pleased with the progress when it comes to that particular piece. I think the only other bit that I would mention is that IFB is really important, not least because obviously it will generate some revenue for the business, but it's also a really important proof of concept. I think I talked a little bit about my real ambition for the business. The thing that brought me here some 12 months ago is that I see that there's a global opportunity with the XEROS propositions, not least on care. And actually the really interesting piece is that because we've had such a successful what we call tech transfer process with IFB, which is effectively now concluded, we have made so many learnings from that some of the big global players that we're talking to about a care proposition are already at a much more interested level than they otherwise would be, because the tech is much more mature and the transfer process is much more effective and efficient now today as well. So I think kind of related to that one is about the talks with washing machine manufacturers in Europe. I think I kind of addressed that one. So in terms of dependence on adoption of the technology in India, I think, no, it's not dependent. There is absolutely an understanding that the specifics of what drives a decision maker, a consumer within the Indian market can be quite different to that which drives the decision maker within Europe. I don't think I'm giving too much away when I say that the brands that we talk to are global. So they're thinking about all of the markets, not just Europe, but Europe, North America, and indeed APAC. And the core fundamentals of what we offer, which is water and energy savings, those are our valid requirements for consumers within all of those regions. So, we absolutely feel this is not just a regional play. Interesting question. So can Xeros be a viable business without future regulatory changes? I think that's a really interesting one that we probably forget to mention. So, as part of our due diligence, when it's come to the specifics of what is a proposition on particularly filtration, we did quite extensive consumer research. So we took about 3,000 individuals across the UK, France, and Germany. We asked them a series of questions, and some really illuminating statistics and responses came out of that. So regardless of regulations, it was absolutely clear to us that at a specific price point, and £70 or €70 is that key price point, 4 out of 10 of the people canvassed would buy the Xeros proposition when it came to microplastics. So that's a very clear signal to us. And obviously we use that conversation when we talk to the washing machine brands, that whilst regulation is driving the timing relating to this is absolutely something that's going to happen. Consumers want it. And I think as soon as the manufacturers are in a position, particularly to help us get the Xeros technology into the hands of the consumers, there's clearly going to be a quite significant market for it as well. Okay, a little bit about Ramsons. So how many machines are the Ramsons factory using that can be replaced by Xeros products? Are they planning to buy more from Xeros? So I think if we make that a broader kind of answer, so it's maybe not just specifically Ramsons, but we talk about Ramsons and Yilmaz as well. So I think we've kind of seeded the market quite well in the last couple of years, and we've demonstrated that the product can work within a manufacturing setting as well. What we maybe haven't had is a piecing together of the various jigsaw pieces within the garment manufacturing industry. It's quite fragmented and it's quite complicated. But with the work that we've been doing in terms of that stakeholder management, in particular on a comms piece as well, we've had some really good engagement, whether it's been the British Fashion Council on one hand, raising awareness of the Xeros technology, which has led to that cavalcade of brands that have come and visited us and seen the Xeros technology in the last 12 months. And indeed that key piece, which is Yilmaz being, I don't want to use the word Rolls Royce, but if you worked within the industry, they're a very, very well-respected brand. The fact that they have decided to go with the Xeros technology is a huge validation. And Yilmaz have access to pretty much all of the manufacturing facilities that we want to, particularly in the core hubs in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and in Sri Lanka. So actually, those combinations, plus of course Ramson supporting the piece as well, absolutely gives us an opportunity to be able to get more. And in terms of what our numbers are for 2024, yeah, absolutely. We've got an expectation that we will sell more machines. I say more pertinently, Ramsons and Yilmaz will sell more machines, which will generate revenue streams from a royalty perspective, and also in terms of an ongoing demand and need for XOrbs as well. Yeah.
Do you want to? Well, we may need to wrap it up next. I think we've got a.
Okay, good stuff.
We've got a Yeah, I think there's a few more questions, but we will, if we don't have time to get to them now, I suspect we will kind of answer them kind of textually, and that'll get sent round. Is that correct?
Yep.
I know, just to say, yeah, absolutely. We will be able to give you back all of the questions immediately after the presentation has ended, just for you to review, to then add any additional responses, of course, where it's appropriate to do so. So, yeah.
Super. Yeah, super. Okay. Klaas, any last words from you?
Yeah, I want to pick up on a few things you said, Neil, if I may. And one of those things, just to bring them out, is if you compare how we conducted the tech transfer with Ramsons a few years ago, and if you compare that to how we have been able to implement our technology together with Yilmaz on their machines, it's night and day. So the learnings from working with Ramsons pay off in future agreements on the denim finishing side. Similarly, the work that we've done on domestic with IFB, gone through the cycle of implementing our technology in their environment. will help us do the tech transfer with future licensees on domestic a lot quicker. And you referred to it a few times, but I think it's important for people to understand that the speed of adoption historically is not what we anticipate the speed of adoption to be going forward. And I think that is also, Neil, why you're confident in sort of our future. So I wanted to bring that out for people, because that in particular was not addressed specifically. I think the momentum that we see in the business at this point in time is real, and that's why we have confidence in second half of this year and next year across all areas of the business.
Thank you. Nicely put, Klaas. Okay, I think that's everything from us, Jake.
Perfect, Neil. And thank you very much, Alex and Klaas, as well, for addressing those questions that came in. Of course, as we just did discuss, we'll give you back all of the questions immediately after the presentation has ended, and we'll publish all those responses on the platform, and we'll notify all the investors when they're ready for their review. But Neil, if I may, just before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to the company, if I could please just ask you for a few closing comments just to wrap up with. I think Klaas may have just well delivered those, but perhaps if there's anything further to add, that would be great. And then, as I say, I'll redirect those on the call for their feedback.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I probably would. I just double down on what Klaas said. I think I still consider myself quite new to the business and to the story. I guess if it gives confidence to the investors, what I can say is that the reasons why I chose to join the business, which are the preeminence of the technology and some really very good minds here within the business, and not least the market readiness, I believe those now tenfold. So I have, if anything, more confidence now than I did join the business after 1 month under my belt. So hopefully that equally gives the investors confidence too.
Neil, that's great. And thank you once again for updating investors this afternoon. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This may take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of XEROS Technology Group PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session. So good afternoon to you all.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.